Could the Denver Broncos defense be undermanned this upcoming weekend as they prepare to take on a high-octane Miami Dolphins offense and Tua Tagovailoa? We'll take a look at the Broncos injury report from Thursday's practice. Plus, we'll give you players to watch and keys to victory. You're going to get all that on today's episode, Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos Country. Welcome into another episode of GMB, your daily bite-sized cup of coffee and Broncos conversation here every single Monday through Friday, weekdays at 9 o'clock a.m. here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. I'm Cody Roark, host of the show. As always, today's episode is brought to our friends over there at Superbook Sports. I'll tell you a little bit about them later on as the show progresses here, but let's go through and let's talk about here this morning the biggest storyline we have to keep our eye on here ahead of Sunday's matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Now, throughout the week on the injury report, we've been monitoring it. Justin Simmons, right now, his status is kind of up in the air here for Sunday's game against Miami. Now, the official injury report lists him with a hip designation here. Well, on Wednesday's practice, he did not participate. Thursday's practice, he did not participate. So today's practice at the Centura Health Training Center is going to be crucial. If he's limited or if he transitions from DNP to full, then there's some optimism. But if Justin Simmons does not participate in today's practice in Denver, then I would say that there's probably some doubt as to whether or not he's going to play on Sunday against Miami. And look, that would be a massive blow here for Denver's defense. Now, granted, last week, okay, hey, Justin played, made a couple of big plays, in terms of some big hits. And I felt like at that point, there were a couple of times it kind of got up slow. And for him, I think he's really been focusing this week on stretching, getting his body right. He's been working on the side field here. But if Justin is unable to go for the Broncos here on Sunday, gosh, that's a massive, massive loss for them on the back end, which means that Kareem Jackson would obviously start, not suspended here by the NFL because of his hit on Logan Thomas last week. But the question now is, who would start in place of Justin Simmons? And ideally, this is where the Broncos are really missing Caden Sterns, who had a successful surgery, from what I'm told, from his patella tendon, and where he had ruptured that. Surgery went really well, and just the guys in the locker room are rooting for him. We're rooting for him. Obviously, he's been very good to the program here on GMB, but this is where Denver's safety depth is really tested. P.J. Locke not eligible to return until week 5, which I anticipate that will be the case for him here. So that means that more than likely, Delarian Turner-Yale, who didn't start last week, but had to step in last week in place of Kareem Jackson, could be in line to start. I mean, here's also another thing too, Broncos Country. We saw it a little bit late in that game last week after DTY. He went down with a cramp and did not return in that game. We saw the Broncos move Essang Bassey from the nickel to the safety spot. Do not be surprised or shocked if we see that scenario potentially play out, which then begs the bigger question, well, who's going to play in the nickel? Who's going to play in the dime here? This is where we saw a little bit of Fabian Moreau last week. Maybe we'll see Riley Moss this week at one of those inside the nickel spots there, or Jaquan McMillan is another name to keep an eye on. Then you have Patrick Surtain, Damari Mathis there on the outside. But yeah, I don't think you can put it into words, or I don't think you can put it on paper, just how big of an impact it would be and a negative facet for Denver not to have Justin Simmons. But the biggest key is being able to get him back this season at some point. So if he doesn't play against Miami, you know what? If that means that he plays the rest of the season, makes it through injury-free, I think everybody will take that. But obviously, he's a big, big impact factor in the Broncos defense and against a Miami team that likes to test the ball downfield. You need one of your best free-range guys to be able to make plays there. So Simmons DNP on Thursday. We'll monitor and update it here, obviously, as we attend Friday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. Once again, no Frank Clark, also a hip designation, 2 straight days of did not participate. We were told last week he's out for at least a couple of weeks, so don't expect him to play this upcoming week here against the Dolphins. And then Greg Dulcich continuing to make some progress over there on the side field. Now, obviously, he's on IR. He's going to be out for quite some time now, at least up to, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. He's going through and he's stretching and he's making good progress. But the key coming back from that hamstring is not overdoing it. So we'll see where things are at there. Mike Purcell, defensive lineman here for the Broncos, popped up on the injury designation report this week with an ankle injury. Did not participate on Wednesday. Did not participate on Thursday as well. So another indicator here, hey, for a guy who's got a very, very big role in the Broncos defense on that interior, if he does not participate on Friday, it would not put his chances of playing on Sunday in a great light. If he improves to limited, which is position specific, or even an upgrade to full, that's a great sign. Now, if you were paying attention to yesterday's report, we also found out Garrett Bowles this week popped up on the injury report with an ankle injury, was limited on Wednesday. He was upgraded from limited to full on Thursday. So everything's all good with Garrett Bowles here as the Broncos prepare for Sunday's matchup against the Miami Dolphins. But, I think this is an interesting time too, because you look at the Miami Dolphins as well. They've got some players that are banged up on the offense and defensive side of the ball. You're trying to figure out what you have here early on here. And I think there's one thing that's really kind of been talked about that kind of has been driving me up a wall so far this week here as it pertains to the Broncos offense. Denver's offense, I mean, if you have two eyes and a brain, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, hey, the offense does look better. Now, they've got to be more consistent. We heard from Mike McGlinchey yesterday, and he talked about how important it is they don't find themselves getting into those lulls where they go 3 and out, they have a turnover, they have penalties that set them backward. But overall, the offense, you can look at it and you can see that the absolute improvement from this season in comparison to last year. I mean, it's night and day difference, and the efficiency there. Denver's just going to have to put it together for more, 4 quarters. Denver's come out firing in the first half of each of these first 2 games. Second half, they've had their struggles here. But I think overall, the operation, I'm not concerned about it. I'm not worried about it. There's a lot of good things that Sean Payton is doing from a schematic standpoint that if you go back and you watch the film, you're like, oh, I see why he did this. If you understand football, maybe at a little bit of a bigger level, that's one thing that stands out. He's setting things up down the line for what he's doing early on in the script. And I think that's a tremendous advantage for him to have. And, there's been a lot of talk, and we'll get into it a little bit once we get into keys to victory players to watch, about verbiage and wristbands, folks. I'm going to go off on a tangent on that a little bit, but let me tell you real quick about our friends over there at Superbook Sports, the sponsor of today's episode of the show. Why bet with the big boys this football season? Instead, try your hand with the local book. That's Superbook Sports this fall. Superbook Sports is the book next door, just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure that you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now Superbook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager on the same day and use the promo code MileHigh. So bet with the best and use promo code MileHigh this football season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Broncos Country, let's get into a tangent before we get into our keys to victory players to watch here. Earlier this week, Sean Payton made some comments about the tempo in terms of him having to burn a timeout or 2 timeouts overall this past weekend against the Washington Commanders, and talking about verbiage and maybe have to shorten some things up a little bit in their verbiage. And all of a sudden, that became like this slight that Russell Wilson can't suddenly call a play in the NFL. And I want to talk about just how stupid and naive that type of thought is. And you're seeing it spread like wildfire on toxic forums like Reddit, for example. You got a lot of people taking it, making a mountain out of a molehill. But here's the reality of the situation. And Sean Payton himself talked about it earlier this week. The Broncos have some play calls in their offensive playbook that are extensively long. That really hasn't been the issue for them. They've been doing this since the preseason. The issue that the Broncos have struggled with that have impacted the timely delivery of getting the play call into Russell Wilson for Russ to be able to effectively communicate it to the offense has been in week 2. They suffered a lot of issues on the personnel side from the coaches on the sideline. They had a hard time getting the right personnel in. I'll give you an example here where Sean Payton had to blow a timeout. The Broncos, they ran one play. The clock, obviously, the play clock keeps rolling on there. From that point forward, they're in the huddle. Somebody's telling Javonte to come off on the sideline, but nobody's coming in for Javonte. So Javonte is kind of puzzled. He hesitates for a minute. He ends up coming off, and then they realize, oh, wow, there's only 10 players in the huddle here. He had to burn a timeout. Sean Payton was on that this week. He talked about it from a coaching standpoint. The coaches have to be better with managing the personnel here. And look, this is for the most part an entire, a new staff across the board, minus some familiar faces that Payton has been previously familiar with. It's some new coaches and some new positions here, and they're still learning on the fly. But here's the thing, Sean Payton, he puts your feet to the fire here, and these coaches are getting a great opportunity to learn how does Sean Payton like things when you're in the heat of battle. And I think one thing as well, Sean Payton likes his timeouts and he hates burning them. And one thing that we saw in that first half there late in that second quarter when the Commanders were rallying, Denver didn't have any timeouts to call. And so that definitely didn't help them in terms of their momentum that was spiraling out of control at that point there. So obviously for the coaching staff, they got to be better with managing the personnel, making sure that, hey, if you have 2 guys coming on, you got to have 2 guys that are coming off. You got 3 guys coming on, you got to have 3 guys coming off, so on and so forth here offensively. And it even trickles down to the defense. So making sure your personnel is the right package there and that you're getting them in a timely manner, because Sean Payton wants to be able to get the play calling. But here's the thing, Russell Wilson in the huddle, he can't call the play until everybody that's being subbed out is off and the people that are subbing in are in the huddle as well. So you get the play call, you relay it. Now, for example, we talk about verbiage. Here's what Sean Payton meant. Some of their play calls have extensively long verbiage. And I'm not even going to try to give you an example right now, but let's just say it's, if you look at it, maybe a sentence, almost 2 sentences long at times here. So one thing when he mentioned about verbiage and maybe putting it to a wristband, it's not because Russell Wilson can't call it. Russ has been doing that just fine, folks. But it's about timely manners, right? And maybe even coming up with a code word for that specific play. That way it's easier because the Broncos offense, and Russell Wilson himself said this, they want to play fast. That's the most important part about this offense. Play fast, get the play off before there's like 8 or 7 seconds left on the play clock. That's what Sean Payton wants. He wants at least double digits on the play clock when the ball is snapped. He's a big believer in tempo, getting in and out of the huddle, getting up there, getting set. It's tough, but you're seeing a lot of people come up with these false narratives about Russell Wilson. And to be honest with you, it drives me nuts as somebody who attends practice, attends games, goes in the locker room, talks to players. Like the amount of blame that Russell Wilson gets for every little thing that goes wrong with this Broncos team. Like some fans, I really question how much of a fan some fans are of this franchise. And I think, to be honest with you, one thing that drives me absolutely nuts is it seems that fandom for some people, not everybody in Broncos country. Let me preface it by saying this. This isn't applicable to all fans, but there are a large portion of very vocal fans that make it seem like their fandom is very conditional. If they win, great. If they lose, I'm never watching them again. These team sucks. I'm not going to pay attention, but yet they watch every Sunday. I get so tired of just like the negative toxicity that's built up in Broncos country. And look, it's not just in Broncos country. It's every other fan base around the NFL. I get that. Winning masks a lot of those things here. But even winning teams, when they lose one game, it's fire everybody, cut everybody, trade everybody. Drives me nuts there. I had to go on a little tangent there. Sorry about that, Broncos country. I'm a little fired up today. But anyways, the weather outside is beautiful, and that's got me really energized here. I've had 2 cups of coffee, so bear with me. Now, let's get to our players to watch here in Sunday's game. Let's go on the offensive side of the ball. We'll go defense and special teams. On the offensive side of the ball, this is where I really think we're going to see Jerry Jeudy do a little bit more this week. Now, obviously, for Jerry, he's a Florida boy. He gets to go back home and play in front of a lot of people, a lot of family and friends. And I think this is a really big moment for him, too, because it's week 2. It's his second week back after having the hamstring injury. I thought overall in week 2 last week and his first week back, I thought he looked pretty good for the most part there. There's still some things you want to get comfortable with your movement here. But this is a homecoming for Jerry Jeudy, which now has everything I think you can ride on it saying, hey, this could be a potential big game. And I think also maybe where Jerry could be in line for a big game is if Marvin Mims and his deep threat ability with his speed, if that opens things up for guys like Courtland Sutton and Jerry even further. Because I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, you have to respect what Marvin Mims can do because he arguably outside of Tyreek Hill, I mean, I think maybe Marvin Mims might be the second fastest player on the field in the Broncos-Dolphins game on Sunday there. Maybe we'll see a 40-yard dash at some point with Tyreek and Marvin at some point here. But Denver's got the speed element. Obviously, the Dolphins have the speed element. But Jerry Jeudy, I think, can be in line here for a big game. He's my offensive player to watch here for the Broncos this upcoming week. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, where does Denver go after last week's performance there where they surrendered a lot of yards really after the catch and a lot of explosive chunk plays on the ground in the screen game and also in some deep passes there? Well, we talked about it earlier. If Justin Simmons is unable to play in this game on Sunday, that really puts a lot of question into maybe what Denver's game plan defensively will be. How does it adjust their shift here? I think defensively here, I need to see a little bit from the defensive interior here for the Broncos. So I think this could be a game where you're going against a Miami Dolphins offensive line that isn't necessarily the greatest, but they have a quarterback and they have a scheme that gets the ball to Tua Tagovailoa's hands very quickly. So this is where I need to see the defensive line and even outside linebackers. If Tua is going to attack you and hurt you with the quick passing game, this is where you're maybe attacking and you're getting your hands up quickly because he does have that trajectory. He can float it over the top, but you can deflect some passes at the line of scrimmage. Maybe we'll see that from Zach Allen, DJ Jones. We saw that last week from Matt Henningsen. And this is an opportunity as well. Like if you're going to get in those quick passing situations, sometimes you see offensive linemen try to chip to get the outside linebackers from jumping up and doing that. But Denver, I think, is going to have an opportunity to maybe get a couple of these quick passes, maybe deflect them at the line of scrimmage, and maybe it changes the way that they play. So for me, I think the defensive line, the front seven edge rushers, those guys are going to have their work cut out for them because of the quick passing game here. And if they're able to limit that a little bit, it will help out the Broncos secondary there on the back end. What about special teams, though? This is where I'm going to go with Marvin Mims, right? I didn't include him, and I could have easily included him in my players to watch on offense, but I want to talk about maybe here in the return game. He had a 45-yard punt return last week. Maybe he'll get the ball kicked to him this week on kick return. He is dynamic. He's electric, and I think he has an opportunity to help move the Broncos offense in special team situations to a point where the field position is favorable for them against the Dolphins here on Sunday. And look, that's a great way to capitalize against a Vic Fangio defense. Things are a little bit different when it's a shorter field versus a long field, and maybe you can open some things up here a little bit. Marvin Mims is my player to watch on the special teams side of the ball here in the return aspect here for the Denver Broncos. But really, what are the three keys to victory? Well, let's take a look here on the offensive side of the ball. The keys to victory is offensive balance here. You have a run game, and you're going to have a chance to run the ball against the Dolphins defense that has surrendered some yardage. They surrendered it to the Los Angeles Chargers there in week 1 in Austin Eckler. You have the opportunity to go out here and establish your identity as running the football to set up the pass there. Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, getting the undrafted rookie Jaleel McLaughlin involved here once again. He had a touchdown last week for the Denver, and then he didn't get a single touch after that. So you have to find a way to run the ball inside effectively, and then it'll open up the passing game here. I think the key word here is balance for Denver's offense. The second key to victory here for the Broncos defense here, limit the explosive plays downfield, and more importantly, get off the field. No penalties. Through 2 weeks of action, we all know that Denver has 12 total penalties on the defensive side of the ball. You cannot win in the NFL if that consistently happens to you week in and week out, because Denver on third down, they're doing tremendous getting teams off the field. However, sometimes there's a penalty on third down, or there's a penalty on second or first down that's attributing to teams having more extended drives throughout the season. So that's going to be a huge key for them as well. It's a quick passing, high octane, death by 1,000 paper cuts type of offense with how quick they can pass it, the weapons they have to pass to, and also the run game that they have with Raheem Mostert, who can hit a crease, and he can go all the way very, very quickly. One of the fastest players in the NFL. There's a lot of speed on that Dolphins offense there, and Denver's defense is going to have to come correct this upcoming week, and they might have to do it without Justin Simmons. And I think more importantly here for the Broncos, you got to generate takeaways. Denver turned the ball over twice in week 2. They were unable to generate a single takeaway in week 2, and then they lost that game there. Now, statistics and history show us if you win the turnover battle, for the most part, you usually have a great chance of winning the game. Unfortunately, Denver did not win the turnover battle last week, and that came back to bite them in the rear end here. But Broncos country, the team has one more final practice here today at the Centura Health Training Center. I'm going to head over there to go check it out. The team is going to leave tonight to go to South Beach, to go to Miami in preparation for their game on Sunday against the Dolphins. We'll have you covered every step of the way. Make sure you stay tuned as well on milehighsports.com. We'll have the recap from the game for you available afterward. And then obviously next Monday, we'll be back for another episode of Good Morning Broncos. If you love this conversation, discussion, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button down below. But Broncos country, we'll see you next time for another episode of GMB,